Hello, Dr. Caleb here with the Sarah Life Center. Today I wanted to share the story of the long, difficult journey that my wife and I went through on our way to parenthood. So, my wife and I got married back in August of 2012. We were really excited, happy to start a family. We were not in a rush to necessarily have kids. We were going to allow God to work in His timing. And a little over a year after we got married, we had our first positive pregnancy test. Now, we were definitely super excited. We were really overwhelmed with kind of joy and hope and dreams. And unfortunately, those dreams didn't last very long. A couple days after we found out we were pregnant, my wife actually had a miscarriage, and we found out that she wasn't pregnant anymore. So that happened in November of 2013. It was a while before we got pregnant again. It was actually May of 2016. We had another pregnancy, another positive pregnancy test, and this one lasted a little bit longer, but again had kind of the same result. Really soon after we found out we were pregnant, we found out we weren't pregnant anymore. And we also had that happen again in March of 2017. So we had three pregnancies that all ended really abruptly, really quickly, before we could even go to a doctor, before we could get any testing done or anything like that. We kind of struggled through a lot of emotional issues and some even spiritual issues during this time. We struggled with some hopelessness. It was difficult to hold on to hope that we were going to have kids of our own. In May of 2019, we had another pregnancy. This one actually lasted a little bit, long enough for us to get some testing done. We had some blood draws, and then unfortunately, before we got the results back, we ended up miscarrying again. But through those lab tests, we were able to find out that my wife had a issue with her progesterone levels. They were extremely, extremely low, and therefore unable to sustain the pregnancy. So we kind of took some time to really focus on restoring her hormones, getting things back in balance before trying again. So in 2020, we had another pregnancy in April. Again, testing came back normal with hormones, but we ended up still losing that pregnancy before we got into the first trimester. And then again in August 2021, we had another situation that was similar to that. Hormone levels looked good, everything else looked good, but we still ended up losing the pregnancy before we got into the second trimester. So after that one, we were really diligent, really focused on our health and our diet, and that following January, for New Year's, we really focused on the food that we were eating, focused on the supplements that we were taking, and we ended up getting pregnant again in March of 2022. Now, this one was actually different. She felt a lot stronger. She had more symptoms. The pregnancy test was a lot clearer. The line was darker than it normally had been before. And he actually made it into the second trimester. Everything was actually going pretty good with Titus, this child, until we moved. We actually ended up moving from Florida to Kansas so I could actually work here in this clinic. And as we were moving, we were halfway. We were at a hotel room in Arkansas, and we turned over that morning, just turning over in bed like she had done hundreds of times throughout the pregnancy. And then she just had a sudden pop and release. All of a sudden, her water broke. We were only at 6 or 17 weeks in the pregnancy, and we ended up rushing to the ER in Jonesboro there. So they did the exams, did the tests, and basically told us that his heartbeat was still there, his heartbeat was strong, but there was very little water, very little fluid, and to expect that he was going to go anytime soon. Since his heart was beating real strong, we decided to hold on and to give him a chance. So they said she was safe enough to travel the rest of the way back to Wichita, here in Kansas. And we got everything unpacked, got the moving truck unloaded, and then the day after we got all that stuff taken care of, the umbilical cord prolapsed as well. So that meant that the umbilical cord had come out, the mucus plug was had come out, and it was definitely a more serious situation at that point. So we rushed to the ER here in Wichita at Wesley Hospital. Kind of a similar story to what happened in Arkansas. There wasn't really anything they could do, but his heart rate was still strong. His heart rate was actually holding steady at 160 beats per minute. So again, we chose to give him the chance to, try and do everything we could to sustain him and to possibly save him. And for 3 weeks, we held on. We continued to see a doctor through the Wesley Medical Clinic and continued to monitor him. And things were starting to look pretty good, starting to look like we were out of the woods. We were just trying to get to 22 weeks because at that point they could admit her to the hospital and start doing steroids to strengthen his lungs and give him a possible chance at a NICU visit or successful NICU visit. If he were to come early, they would also have been able to kind of monitor her and try to get that pregnancy to go as long as it could for greater viability. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get the chance to do that. 20 weeks, one day we couldn't find his heartbeat anymore. So we ended up rushing to the hospital again. So she could deliver our boy that had already gone on to heaven, so we could say goodbye. Now, we had gone through several miscarriages. We had lost 6 children before we got to Titus. But I'll tell you what, being able to hold him in your arms, seeing his body, seeing him form, seeing his features, and getting a glimpse of who he could have grown into be. That loss definitely hit a lot harder for us. And in a way, it was also a way for us to mourn our other 6 losses in a different way. Thankfully, we were able to have a couple ministries that helped us in our difficulty with that. Bridget's Cradle is a ministry that had provided some little crocheted cradles that you can put the baby in with a little blanket, and then even like a little hat that we could put on him. So we're able to get some beautiful and meaningful pictures of our little boy. Because at that size, we didn't have any clothes for him. And with some of the struggles they go through, it's not necessarily the most pretty pictures. But thanks to them, we were able to get some meaningful pictures that meant a lot to us. Another ministry that helped us out a lot was Agape Care Cradle. They helped with funeral arrangements, being able to provide some of the necessary funds to arrange some of that, and for us to be able to do a balloon release as well to honor Titus near his original due date in December. So his original due date was December 7th, and we were able to do a balloon release the weekend before that to honor the impact that he had in our lives, even if it was brief, because it meant a lot to us. And there were so many people praying for him, so many people involved in his story, especially during those 3 weeks that he was holding on, that he impacted a lot of people. Through that, we also were able to get connected with 2 really important doctors, the OB that we ended up seeing all the way through this last pregnancy, and the maternal fetal doctor, or the high-risk doctor, that also monitored my wife through our most recent pregnancy. So, like I said in my previous video, we have a healthy 6-month-old at home, Cademan Nathaniel Frank, and his story is very closely connected to Titus. We were fortunate to have very few complications during this pregnancy. After we had lost Titus, after we had had our stillbirth, we ended up looking at our genetics or having a genome analysis, which is more comprehensive than the genetic test that they do in the hospital. This is actually an epigenetic test that studies how the genes are turned on or off, so it studies genetic expression. And we were able to find out that it wasn't just my wife that had issues with her hormones. We both had issues with metabolizing folate, and my wife also had an issue with blood clotting factors from a genetic level. And that made sense with why we might have had that premature rupture with Titus when the water broke, because of the travel, because of the moving, time spent in the car, and just some stresses that were involved leading up to the move and during the move process. It just left her more susceptible, I think, to a blood clot issue, and we think a blood clot issue is most likely what caused the rupture. Again, we don't really have any clear answers as to what happened on that front, but looking back at the changes we made, how we changed our diet, changed our supplementation prior to getting pregnant with Titus, it really made sense why he was able to actually make it out of the first trimester and be sustained into the second trimester. Through the struggles we went through with him, with Titus, we were able to better prepare for Cademan. And like I said, we had a very successful pregnancy. Obviously, we have a healthy baby boy, but there weren't a whole lot of complications, at least as we went through the pregnancy process. We didn't realize until the day he was born that he did have a couple issues that we weren't aware of, but they were very minor. When he was born, we ended up having to do an emergency C-section because as they tried to do the Pitocin to stimulate the birthing process, his heart rate dropped dramatically and very rapidly. We found out that his cord was wrapped around his neck twice, and he also had a very rare cord insertion called a velamentous cord, which can really hinder the exchange of nutrients between the mother and the child. So this is, like I said, it's definitely been a very difficult and long journey, and it was very tough for us to hold on to hope. We definitely had difficult times in our marriage and our relationship because of the weight of loss. Anyways, this is the story, a very simplified version of the story of the struggles, the journey, and the victory that my wife and I have been able to experience in our own life. And it's because of this journey, because of this story, that I am so passionate about helping others to have kids as well, to be able to avoid pregnancy loss or to be able to overcome infertility issues. So again, stay tuned to some of my other videos coming out. Next one, I'm going to share some other stories from other people and talk about how this is a more common issue than we realize. Till I see you again, wishing you great health and many blessings.